Hello and welcome to Star Diary, the podcast from the makers of BBC Sky at Night magazine. You can subscribe to the digital edition of the magazine by visiting iTunes, Google Play or Apple News, or to the print edition by visiting skyattnightmagazine.com.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to Star Diary, a weekly guide to the best things to see in the Northern Hemisphere's night sky. As we're based here in the UK, all times are in GMT. In this episode, we'll be covering the coming week from the 27th of January to the 2nd of February. I'm features editor Ezzy Pearson, and I'm joined this week by astronomy writer Mary McIntyre. Hello, Mary.
Hi, Ezzy.
So, what do we have to look forward to in this week's night sky?
Well, this week the planets are going to continue their dramatic planetary parade. We also have a new moon, so we can use the dark skies to look for some interplanetary dust, a royal aeroplane and a roller coaster.
As always, you make these sound so fascinating and I have no idea what you're talking about. So please do take us through this week. What exactly royal aeroplanes and roller coasters? Please do tell.
I'll keep you waiting for that one. We're going to start with the planets because they are kind of dominating the sky at the moment. And this parade of planets, as the press are calling it, is getting a lot of media attention. And while it is always really cool when you can see this many planets at once, there are some videos going around on ye old internet saying that this alignment will not happen again for 396 billion years. That's 30 times the age of the universe. So that's just not true. So while it is amazing that we can see pretty much all the planets except for Mercury, they are spread out in a long line along the ecliptic and go from horizon to horizon. And the planets always orbit along that line. So they're always in a line of some kind.
They might be in a slightly different order.
Yeah, most of the graphics are wrong as well. And so, yeah, the planets are amazing. So I will just kind of quickly go through where to see them. Saturn is kind of the lowest at the minute. And by the end of the month, we are going to start losing Saturn in the twilight. But it's currently located in Aquarius, around about mag plus 0.8. So it's still easy to see. It's setting around 8 p.m. this week, but it will be dropping into the twilight. So try to have a look at Saturn while we still can. And even though the rings are closing up and we're seeing them almost edge on, with a small telescope you can still see those rings. I was looking at it last week and it never fails to impress. The planet that you really can't miss at the moment is Venus, which is mag minus 4.5 over in the west. And that is actually very close to Neptune, which is a very contrasting mag plus 7.9. Both of them are in Pisces, and this week they're only 3.6 degrees apart. So they are very close together. So you could possibly use Venus to help you with binoculars to try to locate Neptune because it's too faint to see with the naked eye. They're both setting at about 9:15. So you've got a good bit of time after dark to try to look for both of them. Last week, I believe Venus was at dichotomy, so we're now into a crescent phase. And if you keep watching Venus over the coming month, you will see it change its apparent diameter and its phase angle. And it's always amazing to see that. And weirdly, Venus gets brighter when it's a crescent, because when that happens, it's actually closer to us. And it's just such a bright planet anyway. But yeah, it's not the way round that you might think. So on Friday, the 31st of January, the crescent moon is going to lie below Saturn, with Venus up above Saturn. And then on Saturday, the 1st of February, the crescent moon is going to be between those two planets. So again, a lovely photo opportunity and good to use Venus and the moon to help you locate Saturn and those other planets that are nearby.
Venus really is spectacular at the moment. We can see that, and people have been it's been very eye-catching. Earlier in the month, there was a night when it was really clear and Venus and the moon were together. And suddenly we had all of these people saying, what was that bright star, in inverted commas, next to the moon? And people, started searching for how to see Venus and things like that. So it is something that you will just notice in the night sky. It's so bright and it's really beautiful at the moment. And especially when it's next to the crescent moon, that's always sort of my favorite time is when you see those two together like that.
Yeah, they're always just such a great photo op when they're near each other. Somehow the crescent moon just works better with the bright Venus. I just love it so much. And you don't need particularly high magnification to see that phase either. It's always really fun to have a look at that. Moving over towards Taurus, a bit further towards the eastern sky, we have Uranus, which is mag plus 5.7. So you will need binoculars to see that. That is setting about 2:30 in the morning. So you've got plenty of opportunity to look for that. And also in Taurus, we have Jupiter, which is also unmissable at the moment. It's mag minus 2.4. So that is incredibly bright in Taurus. And that remains visible till about 4 o'clock in the morning. With binoculars, you will be able to see the Galilean moons, and they're constantly in orbit around the planet and ever changing. And if you have a telescope, you may be able to see the Great Red Spot, and that is going to be transiting Jupiter's disk on Thursday, the 30th of January. If you kind of look between 7:20 p.m. and 10:40 p.m., you will see the Great Red Spot in transit, and all 4 Galilean moons are going to be visible. Europa and Io on the left side, and Callisto and Ganymede will be on the right-hand side. There's also on Friday, the 31st of January at 7:40 p.m., there's a really interesting Galilean moon alignment where, depending on the angle that we're viewing the Jupiter system at, it can really affect where the positions of the moons are. And Callisto, Ganymede and Europa are forming a sloped diagonal line on the left of Jupiter, which is a really interesting line because we're so used to seeing them kind of in a straight line, and they're not always in a straight line like that. So Io will be on the right-hand side. So definitely worth looking at the Galilean moons on that night for that interesting shape.
If you want to start getting into planetary observing and Jupiter specifically, that sounds like a spectacular week because you can get everything all at once.
Definitely.
Great red spot, all 4 Galilean moons, and you're done. But obviously, that'll just give you the bug and you'll have to keep coming back.
Absolutely. And drawing it as well is really good fun. We also have Mars over in Gemini, and that is mag minus 1.1. That is visible all night long at the moment and is also looking very spectacular. It's got a very obvious orange colour to it when you observe it naked eye. With a big telescope, you will possibly be able to see some features, including bright ice around the polar cap at the moment. So other people's photographs look absolutely spectacular for that. Mercury is not visible at the moment because it's heading towards Superior Conjunction on the 9th of February. So it's too close to the sun for us to actually be able to observe it. There is an asteroid that is heading towards opposition on the 12th of February, so that's visible all night long. This is 29 Amphitrite, and it's one of the largest S-type asteroids that we have in the solar system. It's got an average diameter of over 200 kilometers. It's actually moving through the cycle of Leo, so it's a really good asterism to help get your bearings. So that's worth having a look at that and see how it's moving over the coming weeks. It's at mag plus 9.5, so you will need optical aids to see that. But just monitoring asteroids' movement against the background stars is something that I always enjoy doing. Moving on to the moon, this week the moon is moving from a waning crescent through to a waxing crescent. So we have a new moon on Wednesday, the 29th of January, and the exact time of the new moon is 12:35 p.m. While the moon is out of the way, it's a really good opportunity to have a scan around the winter Milky Way. And when I was out observing and imaging over Christmas, there was one night I looked up and I thought, oh, it's getting cloudy, that's annoying. And then I realized it was the Milky Way. Like the winter Milky Way was so clear and bright that night. And I'm used to observing the winter Milky Way, and it caught me out. It was so bright. And I think we often just ignore the Milky Way in the winter, but there's actually still a lot to see there. If you scan along the Milky Way band, it goes from Orion all the way over the sky at the moment. There are so many star clusters and interesting objects within it. But if you look around Cassiopeia, the Queen, there are so many interesting things to have a look at there. And it's still at a really good altitude as well. So at 8 p.m. when it's nice and dark, it's still really good altitude for you to have a look at those deep sky objects. There are some asterisms near Cassiopeia that are worth seeking out. One of them is the Queen's aeroplane. So if you follow the line down from Cheddar to Cap, which is the outer edge of the W, follow that path, just double the distance, just a little bit more than double the distance, to find a really golden mag +5 star for Cassiopeia. And if you find that, that is one wingtip. It's the starboard wingtip of this aeroplane asterism. The other wingtip is about a degree to the west, so it's a fairly large asterism when you start looking at it magnified. And that one is a blue star, so there's some really good colour contrast within the two wingtip stars, but the stars in the middle form like a curved fuselage, and they are fainter, but again they have a variety of colours. So if you've got a moon-free clear night, you'll be able to really get some beautiful colour contrast within that little asterism, which is known as the Queen's aeroplane.
As an amazing name, I have to say.
It is, yeah. As somebody that loves aircraft, I'm here for that one. There is a finder chart in the January issue of Sky at Night magazine to help you find these. The other one, I know I talked about this asterism last year. I think it was in March last year, but it's just one of my very favourites that was discovered and named by Eddie Carpenter, who was an amateur astronomer. If you look 3 degrees north of Gamma Cassiopeiae, you will see this long wavy line of stars that are around mag +7 and 8, and it looks like 2 humps of a roller coaster, or you might see it as a bird in flight, like a seagull flying. And it's a really difficult one to pick out on star maps, strangely. You can see it on Stellarium, but a lot of star maps don't really represent it the way that it looks through binoculars. It's quite a big asterism, and it's actually really easy to see, and it's about 3 degrees in length, so it's a big one to spot, really easy to spot, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So definitely look for that again while the moon's out of the way. Finally, as we head into spring again with the moon out of the way, it's time to start looking for zodiacal light. In the spring, it's kind of like a triangle of light that extends up from the west, and it runs perpendicular to the Milky Way. And what that is sunlight reflecting back off into planetary dust. And you do need a really dark, clear sky to see it, but when you do, it is absolutely gorgeous, and it really photographs very, very well, even with modest camera equipment.
It's one of those things I know is on a lot of astronomers' bucket lists of they've always wanted to try and see it. And there's some people who've been observing for years and they've never actually managed it. But if you are ever finding yourself in a really, really deep, dark sky state, that's one of those things that you want to be looking out for at this time of year.
I'd photographed it several times and thought it was light pollution.
Yeah.
It's because it does look like the glow.
Spectacular pictures of it, of kind of like this, there's somewhere it sort of looks like a sort of spire kind of coming up from the horizon and things like that. But yeah, if you're in a dark sky site and you think you've got light pollution where you shouldn't, you might actually be, it is light pollution technically. It's just
sort of is, yeah.
light pollution from space.
And they are really small particles of dust as well, and they're constantly replenished by asteroid collisions and micrometeorite impacts on planets, and material just constantly making it into the interplanetary space. And that's just really cool to think that that's what you're looking at.
There's a lot of times when you think about the solar system, you think of it as this very fixed thing. There was a lot of chaos at the beginning of the solar system, but now we've sort of sorted out where we are. But actually, there's a lot of dynamism going on. There's collisions happening in the asteroid belt, happening all the time for astronomical values of all the time. And rocks are still being ground up. There's things still being created. There's stuff is still going on. Things are still evolving. Not quite as quickly and as readily as before, but things are still happening, and it's fascinating to keep up with it.
It really is, and that's just such a wonderful thing to have a look at. So definitely try to see that while the moon's away.
Definitely a good time to be out there during the new moon, getting out there, looking at all of these, deep sky objects. If you want even more advice on things that you can see during this time, please do go to the website, skyatnightmagazine.com. We've got loads of guides to various constellations. We've got one on Cassiopeia about what you can see in that region. I'll put that in the show notes below. But there's lots of other things going on, so do check out the website. But thank you very much for taking us through all of that, Mary. And to summarise this week again, all of the planets except for Mercury are going to be visible throughout the week after sunset. On Tuesday, the 28th of January, there's not going to be any moon, so it's a prime time to look for zodiacal light in the west after sunset. On Wednesday the 29th, we have a new moon, so use the dark skies to explore the winter Milky Way and Cassiopeia, including the Queen's Aeroplane and Eddie's Coaster asterisms, both of which have some fabulous names. On Thursday the 30th, the Great Red Spot is going to transit Jupiter along with all 4 Galilean moons on show. On the 31st, Friday the 31st, the crescent moon is below Saturn, and there's an interesting formation of Galilean moons on the left side of Jupiter as well. And finally, at the end of the week, on Saturday the 1st, the crescent moon lies between Venus and Saturn. So there's lots of great things to get out there and see in this week's night sky. If you want even more hints and tips about what's coming up, please do subscribe to the podcast, and we'll be back here next week with even more stargazing tips. So from all of us here, goodbye. If you want to find out even more spectacular sights that will be gracing the night sky this month, be sure to pick up a copy of BBC Sky at Night magazine, where we have a 16-page pull-out sky guide with a full overview of everything worth looking up for throughout the whole month. Whether you like to look at the moon, the planets, or the deep sky, whether you use binoculars, telescopes, or neither, our Sky Guide has got you covered, with detailed star charts to help you track your way across the night sky. From all of us here at BBC Sky at Night magazine, goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Star Diary podcast from the makers of BBC Sky at Night magazine. For more of our podcasts, visit our website at skyatnightmagazine.com/podcasts or head to Spotify, iTunes, or your favourite podcast player.